So with no further ado, I'm going to hand straight over to Clare. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Tim. Can you all hear me okay? Yes? Excellent. Okay. So Earth scientists like me try to understand how the Earth works. So how the atmosphere interacts with the ocean, how the oceans interact with the continents. And as a geologist, I'm particularly interested in trying to understand the rocks underneath our feet. Now, geologists make and use geological maps, and the map of Britain was first drawn up about 200 years ago. And what these maps tell us, not only what types of rock we can find at different places, but also the ages of different rocks as well. So in Britain, our oldest rocks are up in the northwest of Scotland. They're about 2.5 billion years old. And the youngest rocks in Britain are found near London, and they're about 55 million years old. Now, the pink rocks on this map are metamorphic rocks, the red rocks are igneous rocks, and all the others are sedimentary rocks. And these different rock types provide us with the resources that our country needs, and other countries around the world as well. So, for example, we can find copper in the Lake District and tin down in Cornwall. We can find roofing slates in Wales and millstones, not that we need them anymore, but they used to be used in the centre of England. Milton Keynes, marked by the star on the bottom part of the map there, is good for brick making. We live in an area where there's clay and there's sand, so we can make good bricks around here. Now, geological action happens where tectonic plates collide, and these plates are the top 2% probably of the Earth, the crust, and these move around slowly over the surface of the Earth, and where the plates either form or plates collide, earthquakes happen. So on this particular map, each red dot or yellow dot is an earthquake, and you can see narrow bands of earthquakes along the centres of the oceans. These are where oceanic plates form. But in areas where continental plates collide, such as across Asia and into Europe, these are where mountain belts form, and this is where I particularly do my research. So the black star is a country called Bhutan. It's on the eastern side of the Himalayas, and I'll be talking more about my fieldwork there later. But you can see there that the earthquake pattern shows a much broader, diffuse pattern of earthquakes as plates collide together and mountains form. Now, a common saying in geology is that the present is the key to the past. And what we can do by studying active mountain belts, how they're forming and rising and eroding today, we can then go back and look at remnants of ancient mountain belts, such as we find in Scotland, to understand how mountain belts form and how quickly they form. So the Himalayas today are on average about 5 kilometres high. Mount Everest, of course, is nearly 9,000 metres high. But the 1,000-metre mountains in Scotland used to be this big as well, but they're now long since eroded because they formed about 400 to 500 million years ago. So I'm particularly going to focus on the Himalayas because this is where I work. Now, India used to be attached to Antarctica and Africa, and about 71 million years ago, it started to split apart and travel up through what is now the Indian Ocean until it collided with Asia. And this happened about 50 to 55 million years ago, the initial part of the collision. Now, to put that into context, the Earth is 4,600 million years old. Okay? So really, the Himalayas are really young. I mean, 55 million years sounds like a long time for human timescales, but in geological timescales, it's the second before midnight. Okay? It's really not very long ago. Humans appeared 3 million years ago, and in fact, the last ice age is only 10,000 years ago. So it really is the icing on the cake. Now, India started moving up through the Indian Ocean at a speed of about 18 centimetres a year, but India and Asia are still colliding together at a rate of about 4 centimetres a year. So Mount Everest is still rising at about 1 centimetre a year. So if you want to go and climb Everest, hurry up, because otherwise you're going to have to climb further, all right? So how quickly do plate tectonic processes happen? Well, snails are considered to be quite slow animals. They crawl at about 3 millimetres a second or so, but that works out as 31.5 kilometres a year. So actually, they're pretty fast. If you compare that to a white cedar tree, which is the slowest growing tree species, that only grows at about 0.6 millimetres a year. Meanwhile, your fingernails and your hair grow at just under 4 centimetres a year. So the rate that your fingernails grow is the rate that India and Asia are still colliding together. So I just want to go through a day in my life in the field in Bhutan. So Bhutan's marked by the red box on the eastern side of the Himalayas there. And this is a picture of the airport. Now, Bhutan's a country about the size of Switzerland, and it's very hilly. And there's only one piece of ground that is flat enough to put a 2.5-kilometre runway in the whole country, and that's where it is, nestled in the bottom of the hills. So if you like flying, this is one of the world's most amazing flights, because you fly in from where you're sitting down towards the runway, and you come in through the valley, and it looks like the wings are about to touch the sides of the mountains, and you duck around that corner and you land. So it's pretty scary, but pretty good fun, but a great way to start your fieldwork off. There's only one main road running from east to west across Bhutan, and most of the rest of the time you have to walk. So our geology, our fieldwork, is carried out in very much the same way that 200 years ago the fieldwork was carried out for the mapping of Britain. So we use these pack horses. They carry about 50 kilos. We have a team that contains a cook and an interpreter and a guide and a couple of helpers, and everything we need for our 3-week trip is carried on the back of these horses. And as we go, our food is slowly replaced by rocks, so the poor horses don't get much of a rest. During the day, we need to basically take everything with us that we need for the day, so we need to make sure that we've got all the right kit and everything. My rucksack's just in the front down here. And again, as we go through the day, it starts off pretty heavy, but by the end of the day, we've got another 15, 20 kilos of rock samples in our bags as well. And sadly, our budget doesn't allow us helpers for rock carrying, so we have to do that bit ourselves. We camp because there aren't any places to stay, and we're at an altitude of about 4,000 metres. So the oxygen level is about half of what it is at sea level, and it's the kind of altitude where when you roll over in your sleeping bag in the middle of the night, you wake up because you're out of breath. So it's a really weird feeling. You get used to it after a while, but yeah, it's pretty cold, it's pretty frosty, so we have all our down sleeping bags and gear. And in fact, it's pretty luxurious on this trip because we even had a table and chairs so we could sit down for dinner, but that doesn't always happen. The main reason why we go out there is to collect samples to bring back to analyse in the lab. And here's a picture of a typical Himalayan sample. The hammer is about 30 centimetres long, that's there for scale. And what we're looking for is trying to pick up samples that give us an idea of the relative timing of when the rock's formed. So this particular rock, for example, has got a foliation, it's layered. So we tried to collect samples of the layered bits. Some of those layers are folded, so that must have happened later. So we're trying to collect samples of the folded bits. And this particular rock's got a granite cutting through the middle of it. And because it cross-cuts all the folded and flat-lying layers, that must also have happened later. So we can collect 3 samples from one outcrop, and it gives us a relative timing of formation. Now, when we get back from the field and we've got our boxes full of samples, we try to analyse them both for the time at which they formed, so the dating processes, and also try to understand their pressure-temperature evolution, so how quickly and how deeply did they get buried and squashed and transformed and then brought back up to the surface again. So this is one of the labs. In fact, I was working in this lab this morning. I shoot at very small parts of the rock with a laser. That releases gas. The gas gets analysed in the mass spectrometer, and by looking at the gas composition, we can turn that into an age. So these are the 50 micron holes I've drilled in a mica grain. Again, these holes are about the thickness of your hair, so you can see all the little spots that I'm drilling in there. So this particular grain's about 14 million years old, I think, from memory. We also analyse the chemistry, so we take little sections of rock, and if you polish them thinly enough, you can see through them. So that bottom left slide is a 30 micron thick section of a rock, and you can see all the different minerals in it. Put them into the electron microprobe, and we can get chemistry from them. So it's a calcium map in the bottom right-hand corner. Now, geology is more than just about rocks, okay? This is the science that links chemistry, it links physics, it links biology, it links geography, field work. That's what brought me into it, was the field aspect. So you can do all those different things together. So you don't just need to study one particular science, you can join them all together and do lots of things. So really, where could it take you? And finally, as for those leeches, yes, there are leeches in the field, but you know, the good sides definitely outweigh the bad. So there's our group on YouTube. We've got a few silly movies if you want to see us in the field, and there's our website, and I'm happy to answer questions later. So thank you very much.